Welcome back. We're here with Stephen Green. He is the audio video production teacher here at College Station High School, and he's going to give us some great tips on how to prevent mistakes from happening that could absolutely ruin our production, bad audio or messed up video or something like that, or maybe even damaged equipment. So what are some common mistakes that you find that your students make when they're recording, especially out in the field?
Sure. I think the top two mistakes that I see my students make is, well, from pretty much the get-go, after the intro course, if they've joined my audio video production classes, I put a nicer camcorder in their hands. It's got all the buttons and knobs and switches, and we go over what all those things do, but then they walk out my door and forget all those things. So the two things that I think they do wrong the most is, number one, they come back with, they spent 3 hours filming with their friends and they come back and, there's no audio on any of my footage. It's all silent. That's tragic and really unfortunate. But it's because a couple things have probably happened. First and foremost, they probably did not have headphones on when they were recording. And if you are recording just the audio on a recorder, or if you're recording with a video camera, if there is a headphone jack on that device, you should be plugging in some headphones and listening before you hit record. Just do a sound check. Make sure you know for a fact that your device is getting the inputs that you think you're recording, because you wouldn't record video without seeing the screen, without seeing the picture at all. And if you don't plug in some headphones and listen to the sound you're recording, you may not be recording sound. And I have a lot of students come back with silent footage and then they have to go reshoot, and that's not a luxury we always have on recording a concert, for example. So don't record silent footage at a concert that is based on music. That's probably the first thing. So headphones are the easy way to do that. Make sure you know how to use your tools, because the other step that my students have probably done wrong is they didn't flip their camera switches to say, hey, listen to audio from mic input number 1, and they had it on the wrong thing, the wrong channel, the wrong input. That's pretty common. My students will also come back with footage that is either, most of the time it's too dark, maybe too dark or too bright. Their exposure is not quite right, and I don't let them use automatic settings in my class just as a teaching strategy. That's not to say you couldn't use some automatic settings on your camera if you're shooting your concert, but in a dark auditorium, you run the risk of your camera thinking, I need a really high gain or really high ISO because it's so dark in here. And you might have that really noisy, speckly footage if you let your camera do all of that. So I recommend you know your tool and choose settings that are appropriate for the environment you're filming in. So make sure that you don't have this really kind of speckly, I can see detail in the dark black area of my stage, but now all my performers are blown out and they're the glowing white ghosts, right? So your camera is going to lie to you or be a little confused in a dark room on a stage scenario. So take control of your camera, make sure that your exposure looks right, and probably the third most common thing I see kids show up with is their footage is out of focus. So we have a process that I recommend everybody Google called critical focus, where you can zoom your lens in as far as it'll go, then focus, and then zoom it back out, and you're probably guaranteed to have a focused image there. Autofocus, if you're close enough to your subject or if it fills up enough of your screen, you can probably rely on it, but you may or may not be able to rely on autofocus just as a general rule. So the other problem with autofocus is that if you have a lens that has autofocus, but it's trying to focus during your performance, it might make a lot of noise as it tries to focus back and forth. And you might have this kind of geary, like robotic sound kind of whirring throughout your footage. And obviously it's moving the focus and it's a little distracting if that's happening.
All right, let's say that, you've got a concert coming up and you've got your group on stage warming up 30 minutes before the concert starts, and, you want to play through some of the music with them a little bit, because, that's the whole point of the concert,
sure,
is to have them sound good, but you're setting up your equipment at the same time. And you use a strategy that you said you plugged in headphones and you're listening to it, and it's like, I've got no sound, and you're flipping out. What could likely be the problem if you have no sound on your field recorder or on your camera? You mentioned having the right setting selected for the audio source. What are some other things that if we could create it like a checklist of like, I have no sound, what could be some of the causes?
The only big one that comes to mind besides making sure your device is set properly is that some mics require phantom power. So some of them will require your device, whether that's a little mixer or the actual camera, might be able to send like a 48 volt power line over to your microphone. If you're using a condenser mic, you're pretty sure to need that. There are some mics that have batteries in them, but phantom power is a really common thing, especially if you put in the headphones, you're not hearing anything, but I know my switches and my inputs are set correctly, but I still don't get anything. Like, what's wrong? Well, if you've already checked that everything's plugged in all the way, you already heard the click when you plugged it in, it might be that phantom power is not turned on. Some of those devices, you'll have to like find it in the menu, in the kind of the depths of, a few different menus to find your phantom power setting. But having tested everything before the day of a concert is probably a great strategy as well. But look out for phantom power. That's probably the other piece of the audio puzzle that people get wrong a lot.
What if you're listening to your audio and it just sounds really distorted and like, this sounds crazy? What could be the cause?
Could be a few things. Sometimes it's that your device is trying to adjust gain automatically and it's cranking it up really high because maybe it thinks that the source isn't very loud. Maybe you have the gain cranked up too loud. And, if you have a fresh battery in your microphone and you've got everything oriented correctly, it's close enough to the source and all that stuff. We would hope we wouldn't hear anything super scratchy and loud and crazy, but most of the time I would find that being a gain problem, so you probably need to back off your gain.
Yeah, just check your levels and make sure that it's not going past the 0 dB threshold.
Right. If it's distorted, it's probably because you have cranked it too loud, and it's probably hitting something past the 0 dB mark. So if you have any kind of display on your screen that shows your audio levels, the general rule of thumb I tell my students is to let those bars top out at around 3/4 of the way up the bar. If they don't show you any numbers, 3/4 of the way is probably a safe zone. We don't want to hit the very top of the meter on our audio meter.
Anything above 0 dB gets lost. They call it clipping, right?
Yeah, clipping or peaking, and it's just not going to sound good at all.
Yeah. So I guess with video, you got your camera set up, your DSLR, whatever, and you hit record and it's not recording. And you're flipping out again, like the concert's starting and you're not in the most logical state of mind. Sure. And you're like, what's going on? Like, it's not recording. What could be going wrong there?
If your camera is refusing to record, you might not have a memory card in your camera. That's a thing commonly. I have a few cameras in my facility where you have to have the right type of memory card for them to actually record, or you might have to turn the quality down to use a lower quality SD card. So you kind of have to make sure that the media you're putting in the camera matches the type of the quality it's trying to record. So that's where your bigger, faster memory cards might come into play. If you have a camera that's going to limit, your memory card options. But if it's not recording, it's probably a memory card thing. If you're seeing picture on the screen and all your settings seem to be right, that's usually the only reason that I find it giving you problems. Sometimes maybe you've taken that memory card and plugged it into a different device and it's formatted differently than it used to be on that camera. One of the things that you might want to do before any concert is just to format your memory card in the camera. So you'll find the option in the menu of the camera that says to format the media or just erase everything on the card. It'll clean it, delete all the files that are on it, and it'll freshen up the file system. Whatever it needs to do to prep that memory card, it will do it, and hopefully that will remove any barriers to recording. I have seen if you find yourself with a nicer camera, that camera may have ND filters built in.
Oh, yeah.
ND filters are a great thing for shooting outdoors in the sunny environment because it almost acts like sunglasses for your camera lens, and you kind of have a built-in thing that will darken your picture. If you come in from the sun and your ND filter is still turned on and you go to a dark auditorium, it may look darker than it's supposed to, and that could be an ND filter that's on when it shouldn't be. That's probably a less common thing for a lot of folks, but it's still something that could happen.
Yeah, if you share equipment maybe with your department or maybe the whole school and somebody borrows it and they change the settings, that could be a big problem for you.
Absolutely.
So I guess double, triple check all that stuff. Sometimes I've had curious parents, and especially if you have a nicer camera, they come in and they're like, "Oh, that's a cool camera," and they come in and they start pushing buttons and stuff.
Yep.
And if you're not there to catch that could be a huge problem too.
Right. It may be worth taping off the area around your camera at a performance, somewhere where you're going to have a crowd, because you always do have the nosy folks or the gearheads that know what the camera is. And they want a closer look, and maybe they want to actually touch it, and maybe they go a little too far, right? You accidentally mess up your focus, or they bump your tripod, and maybe little Timmy's running around and accidentally bumps it, and that all could and does happen in the world. So maybe taping off the area around your tripod would be a good idea, or always go for some sandbags and lock down your tripod. Make sure it's not going to easily turn the other way whenever you don't want it to.
Yeah, sometimes your mic placement can be an issue if you're setting your mics up next to an audience member or something like that.
Sure.
If anything bumps up against the mic pole, if somebody's in their seat and they're adjusting around, like that signal's gonna go directly to the microphone. That's gonna be in the recording louder than, that conduction there is gonna be louder
Absolutely.
than anything the orchestra is gonna play. So maybe tape off your microphones too.
Yeah, taping off the area around your microphone is a good idea, just like your camera, but also just making sure you tape the cable down to the ground, especially if you can find some gaff tape. Something that's not going to leave a lot of sticky residue on your cables when you're done. That's a great idea. You don't want anybody tripping over a cable and bringing your whole microphone down, because that's going to distract people in the performance, in the audience, but also it's going to sound terrible on your recording as well.
Especially when it falls down and it's capturing all that screaming from the person that it just hit in the head.
Or maybe they're whispering and, oh my gosh, but you can still hear their whispering too.
Call 911, he's bleeding,
That might ruin your recording a little bit. Yeah.
It's like, be quiet.
Hard to get that out of your, even when you're editing.
Audiences these days.
I suppose the other option would be to print out some, signs that say, please do not touch, and just tape it to your tripod. That's always an option as well.
Or higher security.
Right, yeah. That's not a bad idea. Get your camera operators to look busy, even if they're not going to mess with it while they go.
Well, I mean, if it's a nice enough mic or if it's a nice enough camera, it might be worth paying somebody a few bucks to hey, stand here.
Mm-hmm. Or offer some extra credit to some students for going to do it.
Hey, good point.
It's always a cheaper option.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah. In terms of common problems, I mean, if you've already gone around and hit record on 3 different cameras, and someone's trying to be helpful and do the same, and they might accidentally go back behind you and stop the recording when they push the record button and they're not paying attention, that's something that could happen, I suppose, as well. But if you've got a crew on hand that's helping you do any of the recording, just make sure everyone's on the same page. Make sure no one's, stopping the recording instead of starting it. That's not uncommon in any kind of video scenario, unfortunately. But always take off your lens cap. Always make sure you have your focus on, and just try to make it obvious that random people should not be touching the equipment. That's probably the best thing to do.
Awesome stuff. Thanks again to Mr. Green for coming over and helping us get better at recording our orchestras, making stuff easier for us, and making sure that everything goes right when it's that big moment. We want to catch that. We'll put some links down in the description of places that you can go to learn more. Mr. Green's been doing this for a while, and he's former teacher of the year, so he knows what he's doing, and his students create some outstanding stuff. So we'll put some extra resources if you want to go beyond this video and really get into this stuff. It can be very fun. It can be really rewarding and enjoyable, just like music, to create things. I really enjoy it, and I've learned a lot from Mr. Green. So thanks for coming out, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, we'll see you in the next one.